This meeting is being recorded.
Once again, good morning. And I'm just going to remind you one more time, if you have your mic on or your mic on, please mute yourself so that we don't get the background noise. And sometimes there'll be there'll be a video that I'll play here that we don't want that coming through. Welcome, everyone. Boy, summer just flies by, it seems. July always seems to be one of those months that take a long time to get through. We always see that, oh, it's still the mid-July and it's still a few days in July, but once August hits, man, time flies by. So welcome. I know a new year is always exciting, and it's something we look forward to, but it's also a time of anxiety and anxiousness, and we want to get going, and there's so many things to do. So hopefully this day will get you started on the right foot with the science curriculum. I'd like to begin by introducing myself. My name is Ted Zeroni. I work closely with Chris Zarski with the Alberta Regional Learning Professional Development Consortia. He's with CARC and I'm with ERLC. Unfortunately, Chris is she's a very busy person, and she is so busy.
We want to know that.
But I will be hosting this session. I'd like to welcome as well Angela Deering. She's in the background here. She's one of the participants. She'll be the moderator. She'll be looking forward to monitoring the chats to see if there's any questions that may pop up. If you do have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, and I will make sure to respond to it later. So welcome, Angela, and welcome everyone. First of all, maybe I'll just like to begin here. Here we go with our land acknowledgement. We know that we're reaching across Alberta and across many lands right now. And I'd like to begin our land acknowledgement maybe with this little bit of a video as it tells us a little bit about what the land acknowledgement is all about as we read through them.
What I've learned from my elders is that when we do acknowledgement of the land, it's not about acknowledging whose land it belongs to, because that indigenous
Donovan, you're gonna love this.
Own the land. We're simply caretakers.
It doesn't matter, Donovan. You're gonna have a meltdown.
And what I've been taught from my elders is that when we do that acknowledgement of the land, it's much more than just the territory. It's the relationships.
Gosh, I'm not even missing anything.
Share the land. It's our relationships with Mother Earth. It's our relationships with the four-legged, the finned, the feathered, the crawlers, the original stewards of Mother Earth. It's that relationship that we acknowledge with the trees. It's that acknowledgement that we have with the plant life that is part of the food chain and helps us exist. It gives us our medicines for healing, gives us food for nutrients. It gives us our medicines for ceremonies. We acknowledge water. Water is sacred. Water is life. What we're told is that when we acknowledge that water, that we always have to acknowledge the carriers of those teachings, which are the women. So we do that in the same voice. We also acknowledge the infinite wisdom of the grandfathers. Then we take that to that next level, is which acknowledging that relationship that we have with father-son, or in some nations, brother-son. We acknowledge that relationship that we have with Nokomis, Grandma Moon, and how she cleanses Mother Earth. We acknowledge that relationship that we have with our distant relations, the star people. So when we talk about acknowledging the land, it's so much more so than just acknowledging what nation was on that. As we know all throughout the history of Turtle Island, is that Indigenous people were, for the most part, nomadic people. They shifted. They would move from season to season. It just so happens that Sheridan sits on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas. So we're very proud to always share and educate people. But in the same breath, I also acknowledge that many other nations have walked this territory, and that their ancestors are still here.
Again, there are some messages on there, and just maybe a reminder for everyone: if you're here, please make sure your mic is muted, so you're not interfering with the presentation with some of the background noise. And Angela, I did make you co-host again, so you will be able to mute people who maybe perhaps have forgotten to do so. So with that in mind, and with the understanding that the land acknowledgement is more than just an acknowledgement of the particular land that we're on, I'd like to read with you our land acknowledgement. And it's within the spirit of reconciliation that we want to acknowledge that this gathering is taking place on traditional lands across the province of Alberta, home to many diverse nations, Métis and Inuit people. We acknowledge that this land is a traditional meeting ground, giving voice to its original peoples and the story of the creation of this country in a way that history has forgotten. Once again, welcome everyone. This is day one, as I mentioned, of the symposium. I see there are many of you here. We have 161 participants, so it'll be difficult maybe to get everybody's questions in if there are some at the end, but we'll try our best. I will share with you my email address at the end of this presentation as well. So if you have some questions that perhaps weren't answered, we can do that with you. Now, it's difficult to prepare for a presentation like this in the sense that we have people from probably diverse backgrounds and diverse experiences. Many of you may have been part of the pilot and have seen some of the work that Chris Zarsky and I have put together for the science. And we're following a very similar program, but at the end of the day, our learning of the curriculum and how it's structured and how it's put together and how the ideas relate together has morphed from when we first began this session a year ago, almost at this time, the pilot sessions. And so we're going to share a little bit of that. How did we get here with you? Some of you may have heard some of the things that I'm going to be speaking about today, but we'll try to begin kind of at the very beginning, assuming that you may need to know where to find some of the documents, how to read through them. And we'll go through looking at how the architecture of the curriculum is put together by looking at the outcomes, and we'll also look at some of the different language convention in it. And we'll hone down to taking a closer look at the cusps, the knowledge in it, in other words, the knowledge, the understanding, the skills, how they're put together, to how you can read the document and to turn the knowledge, understanding, and skills and procedures, and how to put them into some meaningful learning and assessment activities. When we began in May and June, the new the pilot curricula came out for implementation for pilot, but for pilot from K to 6. Just a reminder, please mute yourself if you are.
Sorry, Ted, you gave co-host to not me.
Oh, sorry.
I think you just hit an A name before me, so you want to take 1 sec for that, and then I'll make sure
and get that. Where are you here? Well, I can't find the Angela. There we go. You are, yeah. Angela, you are now.
Now I'm a co-host. We're good. Yeah, apologies, everyone. We're good now. I'll be muting people from here on.
There we go. Thank you. Sorry, I gave someone else the wrong co-host. You're right. Okay, welcome again, everyone. All right, looks like we're on a roll. The pilots came out last spring, May and June, and at the end of the day, we started looking at it, and not too many people were interested in piloting. It seemed at the start of spring, but by mid-August, several divisions and teachers indicated they were interested in piloting the science program last fall. So Chris Zarsky and I, who many of you are probably familiar with, does amazing work in all kinds of areas in math and science. We got together and we began developing some in-service presentations. Beginning in August last year, then we began some overview sessions, and then slowly we began to unpack each organizing idea in our pilot sessions to a total of 333 teachers across the province of Alberta. We began with life skills and worked our way through all the other content-based organizing ideas. We didn't unpack scientific methods or computer science, but that is something that is being unpacked as the implementation begins. In March, there was a new a revision of the curriculum. There were some fairly significant changes to the pilot. So Chris and I got together quickly and began redesigning some of the sessions that we had. by March, we found out that K-3 science is implementation for this fall, and that grades 4 to 6 have an optimal implementation this year. And so with those new changes from the pilot to the implementation curriculum, as mentioned, we did some revising and began some new sessions, and those are all recorded. I'll show you where you can find those later. But we do have some sessions already developed for living systems and matter from K to 6. And I'll show you again a little bit later on in the session where you can find those. And that now brings us to here. We are now in implementation mode. So let's take a quick look at how the curriculum is organized and how it's built. The guiding framework, and there's the link on the slide deck. And I did see one question on there where there'll be we'll be sharing the slide deck. Yes, the slide deck and all the associated links and documents connected to the links will be shared with you at the end of this session. I may be posting some of them in the into the chat box as we move forward here. If not, they'll be available all at the end. But those of you who haven't really had a chance to take a look at the new curricula, it's organized in this way. In the past, our science program used to be set up as units and topics, very siloed oriented. There were certain series of topics that occurred in grade 1 that were different in grade 2, and again different in grade 3. And you could, likely be very successful if you were ill for a certain amount of time in grade 2 science and came back in grade 3 and maybe missed some of the grade 2 pieces. You weren't going to be too bad off because the topics are so discrete within each grade. But with the new provincial curriculum, it's very similar to math and language arts, where things kind of roll together, they spiral together. So what's learned in one grade is also passed on and used as a foundational piece and built on in the previous grades. And those pieces are all organized under organizing ideas. It's really just a statement, excuse me, I went backwards. It's just a statement about science in general. What's the focus of science? So we'll see that there are things like matter or space or energy. So those are things that become the organizing idea. And those run across each grade level. So for example, energy is an organizing idea that spans the K to 6 curriculum. To narrow it down a little bit, there's a guiding question and an associated learning outcome that helps to narrow down the focus of the organizing idea. So, and we'll share some examples, but if we took a look at energy again as an example, we would focus down to what force is in certain grades and then how forces change things and so on. And we'll just keep honing down and separating things out. And all those specific learnings are in the knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures. You'll hear people often refer to those as the cusps or the cusp lines, and cusp is simply an acronym for the understanding, skills, and procedures. And associated with those are also the literacy, numeracy, and the competencies. Those are all areas of learning that are intended to be integrated in some way into all courses, not just science. So for example, when we're doing science, we want to integrate literacy and some reading with it. What is it that students should know and be able to practice and use in different grade levels when it comes to literacy? And numeracy as well. If we're doing some science, for example, and we want kids to manipulate numbers, what should they be able to learn or what should they be able to apply in our particular grade in science? And the competencies are those critical thinking types of skills and communication skills that share across the board. And all those can be found in the New Learn Alberta site. And I'll quickly go there and show you how to quickly navigate it in case you haven't done that before. If you have, please bear with me. I won't be too long with this. But when you log in, you want to make sure you log in with your name. And once you've done that, once you've logged in, you'll want to see this box here called boards. If you don't see that box, it means you're not logged in properly. And if you can't see that, you'll see that there's a little contact. Well, there isn't here because I'm logged in, but you'll see a little contact button at the bottom. Just press that, contact them, tell them your teacher, give them your email address and say you don't have access to the boards, and they'll set you in the right direction. So all the curricula is housed here. When we go into this section here, we can see all the curricula lined up separately here. I'm going to go here. You can go to the printable curriculum. If you do that, then what you get is a PDF of all the curricula together. Some people like that because they can print it out and have it instead of coming back and forth to the electronic one. We'll take a look at a quick look at how to read through here. When you open the section up, you'll see all the different grades. And what you want to do is choose your grade. I'll choose, for example, grade 2. And when you open it up, you'll see 1 or 2 or more grades. And you could scroll through to find out the different grades. So for example, this scrolling gives me grade 1 and 2. And if I scroll this way, I will go to grades 2 and 3. Again, the organizing idea across the grades is similar. So we see matter is an organizing idea for grades 2 and 3 as well. And we want to boil down to our specific curriculum. This is where we boil down to the guiding questions. When it comes to matter, at grade 2, we're focusing down to the suitability of materials that have specific purpose. So when we're building things, materials have certain properties about them, and those properties make them suitable for different purposes. And so students explore that whole thing and understand matter through that lens. When you click on the learning outcome, you'll see something light up. And when you do that, that means there's some extra information. And when you press on that, you can narrow down your view of the curriculum by looking at, for example, this section here. We're just looking at the learning outcome, and it's related, all the related knowledge, skills, knowledge, understandings, and skills and processes with that particular learning outcome. If there are some resources, they'll be made available. There are still resources being loaded up in here for science. It takes you to, you do get hooked into some literacy ones here, but the resources part for science is still being worked on. When it comes to the competencies, there are some suggested competencies that as you plan your lessons and find activities that you can use for this particular learning outcome in science. So not all of the competencies that are listed here. These are just some that would be appropriate for this learning outcome. So you can use some critical thinking skills when you're meeting this learning outcome. You can use some problem-solving skills when you're meeting this learning outcome, and so on. So this is where you'll find all the information and all the curricular documents and all the competencies and that what we spoke about. There are listed down here as well, the competencies. Once again, critical thinking, problem-solving, research, creativity, innovation, and so on. And the literacy progressions are here, as well as the numeracy progressions. Just one other point with the learning outcome. Remember, it is the learning outcome that that we use to assess and report on. It's the learning outcome that must be reported on when we're planning the time to report student progress to parents. So when you take a look at that spiral in the curriculum, you can see that things begin very broad with the organizing idea and hone down to, and it's honed down through the guiding questioning, learning outcomes, and the more specific components about that, that organizing idea are found in the knowledge, understanding, skills and processes, or from now on, I'm going to be referring to those as the cusps. And just as an example of that, well, I'll get to that example in a second. I just wanted to mention one more thing about the organizing idea. The organizing idea, when you do open up a PDF version, if you downloaded that, the principal document, or again, when you look at the electronic document, the darkest line of the color is the organizing idea, and it gives you the key concept related to it, which is energy and the understanding about it. They do go across most grades, and they do contain sort of the big, most important concepts that we're looking at here. When I say span all or most of the grades, you'll find it shortly that not all the organizing ideas go through K-6. They grow as we go along the way here. But just to show you how the organizing idea can continue from grade to grade and then grow as it goes from grade to grade, I'm just going to pull out the idea of matter. The organizing idea with matter is that the understandings of the physical world are deepened by investigating matter and energy. And yes, that same understanding is there for energy. So let's take a look at kindergarten, and that's the gray items you'll see here. In kindergarten, we find that matter composes objects, or objects are made up of matter, and objects have properties that can be examined using the senses. And those are some of the key things that we learn about in kindergarten when it comes to matter. We take that learning and attach it to the grade 1 learning. In grade 1, the guiding question is, how can properties of an object be altered or changed? And that's what students explore. So now we can read this as objects have properties that can be examined using senses and can change. Now we see how each grade builds on the other grade to help build that larger organizing idea or conceptual understanding. By the time we grade 2, it's still all connected. Objects can become materials when they're used for a purpose, and that is one of the key ideas presented in grade 2. And materials themselves we go across properties that can change as well. So that whole notion of change continues on as well. And finally, by the time we get to grade 3, we add on states of matter. For example, objects or materials have properties that can change into different states of matter, and that's where we explore states of matter. And you can see then how the organizing idea deepens and deepens and grows from grade to grade. This graphic shows a little bit more about the different organizing ideas and how they progress through the grades. If we take a look at the left here, we'll see kindergarten has the 4 learning or the organizing ideas of matter, energy, earth systems. There is no living systems in grade 4 as an organizing idea, but there is computer science. Then there is no scientific methods. And as we go through grade 1, we could see the same organizing idea of matter, energy, earth systems also expand on grade 1, but now we add on living systems and computer science. Space does not begin until grade 4. So matter, when it comes to an organizing idea, this is where we take a look at things like, as I mentioned before, that there are properties of matter, and we can explore them by their senses, and we examine how property can change through states of matter. And then when we get into grade 3, we're also looking into things like the water cycle. Grade 2, we're taking a look at also matter when it comes to natural and man-made matter, and how the different uses of matter can be sustained. Energy is an organizing idea. The focus for each grade is here as well. We're talking about movement for the most part. So we're looking at movements of animals and humans in kindergarten. And then we look at closer at some of the characteristics of movement in grade 1. In grade 2, we're taking a look a little bit of light and sound, and how light and sound move, and integrated that as the use of force. And then a closer, deeper look at forces and how forces in simple machines act on movement of ideas of objects as well. Grade 3 is Earth systems as an organizing idea. When we're talking about Earth systems in kindergarten, we're talking about the environment, protecting the environment using the 3 R's. There's a focus on seasonal change in the Earth and its effect on animals in grade 1. In grade 2, we're taking a bit more of a geography look and looking at Earth systems in terms of landforms, bodies of waters, and so on. And when we get to grade 4, we're taking a closer look at some of the layers within the Earth's surface, and we do get into that investigation of dinosaurs in grade 3. I'm not going to go through all of them. Maybe I'll just go through living systems as just a final one. Here we're taking a look at, in grade in grade 1 in living systems. We look at how plants and animals, what they are and how they're related to each other. When we grade 2 living systems, we take a look at development of plants and animals and the life cycle. And then grade 3, we're taking a look at more an analysis of what the relationship between plants, animals, and humans are. We'll talk about computer science and scientific methods later. One thing you'll notice is that there is computer science for sure in the primary grades here. Don't get too nervous. Angela is really good at going to help you calm down those in tomorrow's session. No, Wednesday session, excuse me. But for the most part, the K-3 computer science is not really even working with computers. It's really helping students understand algorithm or instructions and using instructions, interpreting instructions, creating instructions for the most part, because instructions is one of those computational thinking skills. And the idea of a computational thinking is introduced at grade 3. And so you can see how K1 and 2 with the creation and use and development of instructions helps move into algorithmic thinking and later into computational thinking that Angela will take you through on her session when it comes to that. I'm not going to go through each of these, but this will be available to you to take a little bit closer to see what organizing ideas are in which grade. And those, I'll put some links and those will be available to you shortly. So again, as I mentioned, with each organizing idea, there's a guiding question that helps focuses it down. That's not necessarily there to give students. I always go back to it. It's just to refocus on what's the big thing that I want kids to focus on. Because we can get caught up in the little details, but when I can go back to that guiding question and I want to know that how objects, for example, in kindergarten, how can objects, human and other animals move when it comes to energy? That's my focus because I can get caught up on those little details. And the guiding question and learning outcome are always helpful for bringing that back down to getting us to what the big ideas are. Once again, the learning outcome is the lightest color in the band that goes across. And it's that what we must report on to parents. And the key concepts that are to be learned and some of the key skills are in there. So when it comes to this particular learning outcome, you can see that movements and objects are the key things here that appear in that learning outcome. And then that whole notion of students exploring, so asking questions, describing things, giving their thoughts on things. And finally, the cusp lines. These are the knowledge, understanding, the skills. I'll focus on them. I'll talk about these a little bit deeper as we move forward. But just as a brief introduction, remember those knowledge things are the facts and the definitions of some of the key concepts. For example, we see that there's a definition for movement there, and it's just all that knowledge related to the understanding. And once we have the knowledge pieces, then we put it together in the understanding. In this particular case, objects, humans, and animals can move in various ways. And if you take a look at the knowledge piece, again, you could see how those are, the knowledge is more detailed in terms of how, and they give examples of how movement can happen and so on. And finally, the skills and procedures is a way for students to demonstrate what they know and understand. And there's always a verb that goes with it. So in this particular case, we can see in kindergarten, the students are expected to move objects in a variety of ways. These can be used as activities. These can be used as assessment pieces, depending on the context that you use and the material that you give students with. And so the skills themselves become important, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. But the skills and procedure statements uses a verb and has them doing something either with the knowledge or the understanding to demonstrate their depth of knowledge with it. Now, of course, I'm going to mention this now. If we're getting students to do these things to demonstrate what they know or understand, they need to be proficient at it. So if I take a look at, for example, observe and imitate how animals can move, well, what does it mean to observe? And so I want to make sure that students, if I'm going to tell them to observe something, I'm going to get them to do some observations and help them understand what an observation is. For example, in grade 1, you could see conduct an investigation over here. Well, I'm not going to have students conduct an investigation to determine how objects move at this point without having run through what an investigation is and having them practice an investigation before they show their meaning with that. To help you along, you'll notice that along the way in our examples that Chris and I use in our sessions and in other examples, you'll find out we often refer to numbered outcomes. These are not in the Alberta Ed documents. This is something that Chris has developed, and Chris and I have worked on these in the last for the new curriculum as well, the implementation curriculum. It's just a numbering system that is there to help you and help you and your colleagues and you work together to identify what part you're working on in the curriculum. And I'll show you what I mean here. If we just take a look at the kindergarten organizing idea of matter, you can see the guiding question, and below it is the learning outcome. In the Alberta Ed documents, it does not have this KM 1.2. That is something that we added to help locate certain things. In that lettering system, the K refers to, or the first letter or number refers to the grade. In this particular case, K is refers to kindergarten. If we were at grade 1, we would have a 1 here, a 1M 1.2. So this is just the grade. The second letter represents the organizing idea. In this particular case, M is for matter, E would be for energy, ES would be for earth systems, and so on. And then the learner outcome. In most cases, there is only one learner outcome. As you know, in science or math and language arts, with each organizing idea, there can be more than one learning outcome. And so you'd find the number 2 if you were working on the second one. But all the science ones are, until you get to the older grades, grades 4, 5, or 6, you're going to have only one outcome for each organizing idea. And the number that comes after the decimal is the row of understanding. And when we take a look at this graphic, we'll see that we have one row of understanding for this kindergarten outcome. We could see it, and when you look at your document, you'll see there's just the one row here. So we're talking about the information in one row here. Same with this, you'll see that this number for grade, this should be not K, but this should be 1M 1.2. So I'm looking at grade 1, first learning outcome, the first line of the cusp that shows up. You can see a little bit better here what they look like. That's just the same graphic. I'll just move on with that. So those are available to you if you want. I'm going to throw some links in the chat box shortly, or at least share a resource with you that'll have all that. I don't have those available right now, but I will make sure you get those in the chat box for you soon. So once again, these will just be here when we go, when we take a look at the outcome. If you do open this document, please, I'd like you to just watch one thing here. I'm going to just circle these here again, or just with my cursor. You'll see that they do change that kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, and the 1.1, 1.1, 1.1 behind it. If I were to scroll up to the next one, to the next line, the outcome would remain the same. So in example, kindergarten, children examine properties of objects. If I were to scroll down in the document, you would still see that same learner outcome because the learner outcome doesn't change, but I'd see it's kindergarten matter learning outcome 1-2, a second line. So the learning outcome won't change, but the cusp line will change. That'll be made available to you as well. I just want to talk a little bit about the learning conventions. As you read through your the cusp lines, especially the knowledge piece, the words include, such as, are often used. When you see the word include, it means that it's something that you must include in your work with the students. In this particular case, and if we're talking about objects in space, they must include the moon, the star, planets, and other things. You can add other things after include, depending on your situation, your location, but you have to make sure to include these things here. Whereas if we go to the bottom, if we see the word such as there, or in the new curriculum, there is the e.g., for example. Those are things that you can use as examples. So in this particular case, diverse plants and animals can be found in many environments such as, in Alberta, such as these environments, but you can choose any environments that you want. what we find is that the examples that are listed there are ones that people generally use, and depending on your context, may add or focus on other ones. And finally, when you see a word in brackets, that signifies the true scientific word that is being referred to by the italicized word that precedes it. So, for example, we're taking a look at what light can travel from its source by bouncing off of a surface. Well, instead of saying reflection, we can use the word bouncing with our students, especially if we're assessing them. We wouldn't necessarily expect that they use reflection. An acceptable term to use would be bouncing off. Most teachers find, again, that they begin integrating the actual real word, and students do learn the actual word, but that would depend on where your students are and what their abilities are. So bouncing off is the acceptable one for assessment, but students by all means can learn those other words if they wish. Something else that will be made available to you is the comparison document. This particular document is going to be organized this way, and you'll get the link for it. Sure, you'll get the link to it. If you just take a look at these 1, 2, 3 columns, these are the cusp lines that you'll find. So when you open this document up, it'll essentially compare what is in the new curriculum to what has been available in the old curriculum. This is color-coded, so if we see pink, we're talking about matter. When you open it up, there you'll see that energy is color-coded another way, and so on. All these things listed under the learner outcomes, understandings, and the skills and procedures, those are all directly out of the implementation curriculum. And then when you move to this far left column, what Chris and I have done is put in some connections to that links from the old 1996 curriculum, the one that is being replaced. So we can see, for example, when it comes to this particular learning outcome, there is a link to it in grade 1, topic C, building things. Because this curriculum is quite new in a lot of areas, you'll find that this left-hand side is going to be blank in many cases. But if you want to know, maybe talk to a teacher who has taught some of the things before, you can go to that teacher and to see what resources they may have or some lessons they have that might have been helpful to them in when they taught this topic. So that's available for you. And again, it'll cover all of the organizing ideas. And this left-hand side will show you some possible links to the older curriculum or to the old curriculum. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just, whoopsie, it's going to back up. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just copy this right now and I'll put this into the chat box, so you have that for you right now. Where's my chat box? So you can find one that suits you and you can take a look at it. And if you have any questions along the way, by all means, you can fire along something in the chat box or email me later, like I said. All right. So that's generally the broad picture of the curriculum. And what I'd like to do now is go dig a little bit deeper into more of the specifics about the curriculum and looking at some of the foundational pieces. And we have to begin with the idea of talking about concepts. So we're just going to change it up a little bit. Many of you are probably familiar with the idea of a concept, but those of you who'd like a refresher or just not quite clear, just to really talk about it a little bit. Concepts are basically nouns that are working as an organizing idea. It's usually 1 or 2 words. For example, the idea of chair, it's a concept, right? It's a noun, it's a concept. It has distinctive attributes. Those are all examples of chairs. They all share similar characteristics or attributes that make them chairs. And so you can see that with each concept, there are multiple examples. Some doesn't matter the color necessarily. There doesn't matter the location of it. Doesn't matter if it has wheels or not. Those are some attributes that are non-essential, but you can see that with each picture that there's something about those chairs that make them chairs. And if they had some other attributes, who may be saying, well, there's a stool, and we can distinguish between a stool and a chair, even though they're similar. We know that they are different based on their attributes. Furniture would be a broader concept, and chair would be then an example of that broader concept of furniture. And so there are many broad general concepts and more specific ones. Some are abstract, like planet or democracy. Some are more concrete, like planet, and so on. But all those that you see listed there are just examples of concepts. Again, they're just organizing idea, nouns that we can classify things. So when we take a look at the surface of the earth, we can say the surface of the earth is full of landforms and the way the land is shaped. We classify then a mountain as a landform or a valley as a landform and so on, because it has the characteristics of a landform. And we use those concepts often to focus in on things. Concepts can be used as conceptual lens. For example, when I display the word I spy, I could focus in on something by saying I spy something that is blue, and we're focusing on all those things in a room or surrounding area that are blue, and the lens helps us to remove other things, right? So I'm looking for the one idea of things that are blue, and I won't notice the things that are red, green, black, or whatever. And that's really, in a sense, what a concept helps does as well. So when we take a look at the world, and in this particular case, I have an image, or if there's a news clip or something, the more concepts we understand, the more we can focus in and understand that particular part of our world. For example, with this photo here, if I'm familiar with the concepts of ecosystem, diversity, interaction, and climate, I can see those things in it by focusing on those. If I was focusing on climate, I could see, well, okay, this is a very lush area. It's probably humid, tropical climate. I could tell by the vegetation, by the color, by the mist in the air. But if I was to focus on interaction, I would see something different. I know with interaction now that humans and the environment can somehow interact. And I see that there's some interaction with humans there. They built a road there. They've left a mark somehow on that environment in some way. So by the more concepts we understand deeply, the more we're able to look at our world through different perspectives and understand it in many different ways. So the concepts themselves are located throughout the curriculum. In this particular case, you could see the guiding question and the learning outcome identify the idea of purpose. And you can remember the concept map that I showed you earlier when we were talking about the building of the concept or the organizing idea of matter. Purpose was one of those concepts that I had in there, and we see that showing up in grade 2. So when you take a look at that, we can also see purpose does show up in different areas, but not necessarily in this particular cusp line. It does show up in different cusp line. But there are other concepts here as well. And what I'm going to ask you to do, you can just pause and reflect and think a little bit about where we're at here to see what are some other concepts located in here that may be important. And if I take a look, for example, I'm talking about properties. Okay, that's something that's in there. We don't see it show up in the rest of these cusp lines, anywhere in this cusp line, but materials is here and it shows up. So I'm just going to ask you to just pause for a moment and take a look and see if there are any other concepts that pop out at you. And the reason we identify concepts is to make sure we're all on the same page. And when we work on the understandings, we're all working on the same ideas when it comes to focusing in on those understandings and their little pieces. So in this, you might have, if you didn't identify them, or you corrected or identified some wrong ones, like don't worry about it, because you'll probably get good at it the more you start reading the curriculum and looking for them. But you could see that if you highlight the concepts, you'll see that there are many that repeat themselves. For example, materials, natural materials, processed materials. When you see that in the cusp line, you get a sense of what becomes important. What are the key things to really focus on here? What are the key ideas when it comes to organizing and planning your instructional activities and your assessments? You can see that those are all the key ones to focus in on. So within each organizing idea and specific cusp, including the knowledge, understanding, and skills, those concepts are there. So we'll need to take time to make sure students learn those. And when we take all those concepts, we can organize them in many different ways. What I've done in this particular case is organized all the concepts, the key concepts that come out of grade 2 matter. And we could see that the focus is on materials in this particular case, and that materials can be natural or processed, and they could be used to make objects, and objects have properties that are measurable, and in terms of length, area, mass. So those are the things we'll be looking at in grade 2. We're developing ones for all the organizing ideas. Right now, you'll have available to you, and I'll show you a little bit later where to access them, the concept maps for all of the for matter, from grades 1 to 6 for matter, and the concept maps for living systems from grades K to 6. Now, if I were to take all those lines away, again, those are some of the key things that we want students to learn. So I would just take length, area, mass, and measurable, and take some of the, and just get rid of the lines and maybe give students these words perhaps, and the word tools. We would say, can you put these words together in a meaningful way? And if students understand what they are, they can organize them some way and explain them to you. So by focusing on the individual concepts, having kids organize them, it helps us to see what they think, what they know about the concepts, and whether or not some more teaching needs to take place. So those are available to you as well. But again, the organizing idea is composed of a whole lot of concepts put together in some meaningful way. There is so all the individual concepts, they don't show up in just one organizing idea in one grade. They show up in multi-grades. To look at this graphic, I'm just using this as an example to show you how the concept of properties not only is introduced in kindergarten, but it shows up in grade 1, and once again in grade 2, and grade 3, and once again in grade 5. When it comes to states of matter, we're talking about states of matter and introduced in grade 3. We're talking about states of matter, we're talking about waste materials in grade 4, and so on. So once again, this is very different to what we've done in the past in terms of teaching in our topics and our silos, that we teach things and the concepts move on from grade to grade. So not just silos. I'm just gonna get out of the slideshow, for example, for a moment here. And I'm just gonna jot this in here. And I'm going to throw this in the chat box as well. What this is the list of the concepts and their progressions from grades K to 6 for each organizing idea. So in this particular case, I've got the concepts all listed down here, the key ones for matter and how they progress to the grades. And there's one for energy as well. What is the guiding question, the learning outcome, and what are the key concepts within each grade and how they move forward from grade to grade? So that's available for you in that link that I just passed. Just to once again, to give you a sense of what you can expect students to know, and it can help set up some pre-assessments. So if you're in grade 3 and you know that students need to know they're coming in with these concepts, you can do some pre-assessments to know where they're at with those, because they're going to need to know these when you move in to your grades learning outcomes. So what I'm going to do is just take a closer look at the cusps. I'm going to have to move quickly here. I'm sorry, I just realized how fast time is flying by. The cusps, again, are the knowledge, understanding, and the skills and procedures. The knowledge piece, that is where we're going to find those concept definitions. So, for example, movement is defined here. All right, that's where we'll find those definitions. Many times they aren't defined, and they'll just use a concept in this particular case. If there is not a definition in the knowledge piece, you can do two things. It may be defined in another organizing idea, so you can go through the search function when you open up your New Learn Alberta, the curriculum guide, or if you download the PDF of the curriculum, you can search for a word and see if it shows up in another organizing idea. And sometimes it shows up in a different grade. So, for example, if I was looking for the word if I was looking for properties in grade 3, I see it's going to be used. I would find the definition for it. If I did a search, it would show up as a kindergarten concept, and the definition would be found there. The knowledge piece also gives examples of the concepts. So properties is introduced in kindergarten, but also in kindergarten, the examples of what some properties are. They include length, area, and so on. Once again, if there are no examples provided, you'll have to give them. But we can see these examples must be included. We've got the word include there, but we can include others, such as perhaps color or something like that, as a property of an object. So the knowledge piece has those examples, and they have definitions of the concepts. So once we work at those individual concepts, we can move on to the understanding. The guiding framework defines understanding as how those facts and knowledge pieces fit together in a logical and meaningful order. In the curriculum, we would find these three concepts: human activities, change, land on earth. We can investigate what are human activities. Human activities include individual activities such as jogging or riding a bike or camping, to larger human activities, societal human activities such as agriculture, mining, recreation, and so on. So we know what human activities mean. We know what change means. We can find examples of change. And we know that land on earth means a similar thing to landforms or the surface of the earth. And we know that the surface of the earth includes lakes and the different things growing on it and the landforms. The understanding is really a combination of these things. If I was to ask you to put these three individual concepts into some, again, meaningful and logical order, it may look like what we have on the right-hand side here. We could see those concepts are stated this way: change to land on earth affects human activities. And if that's an understanding, we should be able to find examples of that. Does change to land on earth affect human activities? Sure it does. If we think of an earthquake, that's a change to land on earth, and it does affect human activities. But can human activities cause change to the earth's surface or to land on earth? And once again, we would find that that is true. So the individual concepts become something different when we relate them together in some meaningful order, and that becomes the understanding. When we take a look at our curriculum guide, we'll see exactly that statement, that human activities can cause changes to the earth's surface. And on the side here, we see that there are different human activities that can cause change on the earth's surface, but how does that happen is something we'll explore a little bit later on. You'll notice in this particular case, I'm just focusing on human activities that can cause changes to Earth's surface. We know that plant activities, we can explore that, can cause changes, as well as animal activities. So I've taken this understanding and divided it up. And when you put them together, we can see that all three of them would. But that's essentially what the understanding is. It's taking all these individual concepts that we learn here and putting together. And this understanding piece is really should be the focus. This is what we want students to understand. And so we give them, we go to our skills and procedures, and we find things that they should be able to do to demonstrate that, to relate human activities to changes on the Earth's surface. And we can give them different contexts. We can show a clip on a culture doing some kind of agricultural activity, and maybe show a North American agricultural activity, or a variety of contexts. It could be recreation. Does that cause activities to human changes on Earth's surface? So it have them test that understanding using a variety of contexts over and over again. This is, again, where I'm going to be spending my time. We want them to know these things, but once they know it, we don't stop there. We get them to put it together and say, is it true in this particular case that human activities can cause changes to Earth's surface? Explain why. How do you see that in this example? How do you see that in the story we just read? How do you see that in the case study we just took? Going back to here again, another example. I'm just giving a picture, and you've seen this picture before, but good skills and procedures might be, say, relate human activities to changes in the Earth's surface in this picture. They would need to know what human activities are, what change means in the Earth's surface is, assuming that they know that before this road is here, there was probably just grass or more trees, and there was no straight line. You wouldn't be able to see straight through it. I'm not too sure if we're going to do this. I think we're maybe running out of time. But what you might want to do at some point when we're finished here is take a look at that cusp line in an organizing idea, and take a look and see, well, what are the concepts in the understanding piece? That middle piece in the understanding is going to be 2 or 3 concepts. Where do they appear in the guiding question or in the learning outcome? Are they in the knowledge outcome? Are they defined? And if they're not defined, where can you find a definition for them? Is it another organizing idea, or is it in another grade? Or do I have to Google a definition for it? Where do they appear in the skills and procedures column? And so it may be a good idea to take each cusp line at a time and to sort of highlight those concepts and to see how they're connected and how where they show up with each other and where they appear. We're not going to do the timer. We're going to go here. So that was a quick look going through the, a quick look going through the knowledge and the understanding. I'd like to talk a little bit about the skills and procedures. That column, again, are what the students do to demonstrate knowledge and understanding. In some cases, it could be comparing and contrasting. Compare and contrast these two environments. If I ask students to do that, though, if they're doing a skill to demonstrate what they know, I'm going to want to make sure they know that skill first. Because if I give them a compare contrast question such as that, and they have no idea how to compare and contrast, and the answer they provide in comparing and contrasting two environments is dismal, I don't know whether it's because they don't know how to compare or contrast, or maybe they don't understand anything about environments. So you want to make sure to take time out to teach some of those key skills to students using content that they're not responsible for. So they get good at it. So when you do give them an activity for them to demonstrate their knowledge or their understanding, their attention is not competing with their ability to do the skill. They know how to do the skill. Now they're going to use that to demonstrate what they know. I'm just going to go here to this next slide. I'm going to put this in the link here in a second here. I'm going to go back. I'm going to share this a document that I'm going to share with you now on the skills and procedures shortly here. I'll just type it in here, but I won't send it just yet because I want to quickly go through it so you can see what we're talking about with the skills and procedures. The skills and procedures, again, are the verbs, and they're things that students do. This graphic here shows you, this is the one that I'll send to you shortly, identifies those key verbs that show up in the learning outcome. So students in the learning outcome in kindergarten, they're going to know how to describe. They're going to need to examine. In other words, they're going to be asking questions or looking at something closely. They're going to be making observations here, maybe describing something. Here, they're going to be exploring as well. So explore this, explore that. They're going to observe, ask questions about it, tell you about it, what they learn about it, and interpret instructions. When it comes to grade, interpret instructions is a computer science piece. In grade 1, in the learning outcomes, analyzes appears, and you can see that there are some similarities across the grades. And so those we know that would be key skills that we'd want to help students learn what they are and become good at them, because those are the ones that need to be assessed and reported on. But there are a multitude of other skills and verbs and procedures that are in that skills and procedures column. So if we would just take that verb out, we would get a list that looks similar to this. Now, these are not all the verbs that are in the skills and procedure statements. These are the most frequently used ones. In other words, what the curriculum does for students to demonstrate their learning, they're asking them to demonstrate their learning by doing these things. The darker shade indicates that this verb, ask questions, you'll find it in some of the skills and procedures statements in your grade. So ask questions, for example, so you'll see that appear in skills and procedures in the grade 1, in the kindergarten curriculum. You'll see compare and contrast show up in kindergarten curriculum. You'll see explore show up and discuss. And you'll see the dark ones for the different grades as well. That's where they'll show up. If it's a light colored item here, it's not specifically stated in the skills and procedures statement, but it's assumed they probably should. For example, asking questions. It does not show up as asking questions in any skills and procedures statements for grades 1 to 3. However, we do know that when students do an investigation, one of the first things involved is to ask questions. So asking questions is something that would continue on, even we could include whenever possible, even though it's not explicitly stated in the skills and procedures. A quick look at the computer science skills that happen or that are available, that are focused on when it comes to the primary grades. I've color-coded some of the key things here, and Angela, who's our co-host here, will show you those a little bit more. These are color-coded in terms of what students are expected to do at that grade level in computing science. The yellow refers to just following instructions. So in kindergarten and grade 1, we could see there's things where they follow instructions. The pink here is creating instructions. So you can see that from kindergarten to grade 3, students are creating instructions with more complexity as we go along. The blue represents thinking about the instructions. If it's not working, what do I do? Reviewing it, is it a good? How can I test the instructions, and so on. So that gives you an idea of what is expected in terms of skills and procedures for your grade there. Now, the reason I'm including these is because you don't want, these are, although they're computer science skills procedures, they're ones that you can use with any organizing idea. And that's where Angela Deering will do her magic with her sessions, is how do I incorporate this into life skills? How do I incorporate this into matter or living systems? And she's going to give some great examples when she does her sessions. And again, in other sessions that we'll share later. Same thing with scientific methods. The whole idea of the investigative process is introduced in grade 1 with 4 steps. When you get to grade 2, there are, I believe, 7 steps here. And this is the only place in grade 2 is where the investigation process is formally identified. Grades 2 and up all the way to grade 6, you'll find in the learning outcomes, students will investigate this, or in a skills procedures statement, students will investigate or have students investigate. This is what is expected to be done when an investigation is being done. They're color-coded to again, show where the similar skills show up. So asking questions is the first step in grade 1 investigating, as well in grade 2, then therefore in all the other grades. And that's where on that chart that I showed preview, asking questions is a light color. It doesn't specifically say it necessarily in a learning outcome, but it'll appear in a skills and procedures statement. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to send this. This is the link that I just sent to you that has that document that I just shared with you. Now, just another quick change here. So what we've taken a look at is how the curriculum is organized, its architecture. We know that we got to hone in on that knowledge piece that contains the concepts, and then the understanding piece that takes those concepts and organizes them to an understanding. And we use our skills and procedures for students to demonstrate what they know or to demonstrate what they understand. And we do that over and over again, because at the end of the day, probably what our job as educators is to help students take what they learn and apply it to their world, to their life in some way. And we call that transferring. And all these things, concepts, understandings, and skills do transfer from grade to grade, from school to out of school, from one organizing idea to the other organizing idea. In a sense, we as educators are in the business of helping students to transfer what they know so they become successful in the world and interpret their world and make sense of their world when they come across it. So the big question becomes then, well, how do we get students to transfer? To answer that question, I'm going to go to the work of Hattie, Fisher, and Fry. And they talk about 3 phases of learning. The first phase is the surface phase. And that's, again, when you can almost sort of picture the curriculum behind this. That surface learning piece is where we learn the knowledge and the concepts and basically get good at it. And so you can see in this diagram, in that knowledge piece, we're going to be learning about different concepts. As I mentioned here, if we're going to get kids to compare and contrast, well, at that surface level, I'm going to help them to practice and learn how to compare and contrast. Or what is a good discussion? It's a skill. What does it mean to have a discussion? Let's practice having a discussion before I have them use that skill to demonstrate what they know. And that would then all happen at the front end at the surface level. At the deep level, that's where the understanding happens. And that's where we make connections between the concepts. So if I take these 3 concepts here, they're not just individual concepts anymore. They are now connected in some way. For example, humans can change the landscape. Now, if that understanding is true in this context, now I give a different color background that represents a different context, a different situation. Maybe we watch a little video, it's orange context of something in southern Alberta. Maybe we'll go to a forested area of Alberta and use a different context to apply this different understanding. We could use many different contexts to keep applying that same understanding. So we deepen that and we test their understanding. Is it really true? And we use different skills and procedures. I'm going to have them compare and contrast to help them demonstrate that understanding here. In this context, I'm going to have them maybe do a discussion to help them help students demonstrate that understanding. Until we get to the point of transfer, which is here, which is really then having students apply what they know and are able to do in increasingly novel or unfamiliar situations. And so you could see that already we're getting students to transfer here because we're changing the context up for them here's a new setting. Does it make sense here? When we get to transfer, we're at the transfer phase when we start giving kids more independence with it and a very novel or something really unfamiliar to them in terms of a context. That's when we transfer. That often piece will be our good assessment piece at the end. When you take a close look at the PAT exams in grade 3 and grade 6, a lot of them are transfer questions where they use concepts, but they'll provide an unfamiliar situation, an unfamiliar reading, or an unfamiliar case study, and students really apply what they know to that. And so these can become our assessment pieces as well. What I do want to, I'm just going to go back here. Maybe I should point something like this as well. Many of you may be familiar with the work of Rachel French. Her inquiry process really, in a sense, goes for these. She has more phases, but you can put her steps into this phase. Some of you may be familiar with Julie Stern's work. She again goes through a very similar process with transfer, but she talks about acquiring, connecting, and transferring, which are very similar steps as to this. So if you come across those literature pieces, don't think they're talking about the same thing. We're talking about very similar things here. I'm going to now go back to the skills and understandings for a moment, or skills and understanding, skills and procedure. Because when we take a look at the skills and procedure, it will help us to get ready for that surface, deep, and transfer piece. Here is, for example, an organizing a cusp line from kindergarten matter, the first cusp line. And this is the way it's written in the curriculum on the left here. And you'll notice what I did was I color-coded things. I've taken this skills and procedures, and when you look at it carefully, what this is referring to is helping students to do this, to demonstrate their understanding that objects have identifiable properties. So they're going to do that. So we can say that once we're giving students an activity, giving students an activity that has them do this, we're working at the deep level. And I've connected this as well, comparing and contrasting various objects. That connects to this understanding. So this would be a good activity to work at the deep level, but you can see here that I want to have students understand what comparing is and how to do that before I give this activity to them. And here, these connect directly with this knowledge piece. So these would be at the surface level. So if I get kids to sort objects according to properties, I'm really having them focus on just properties, really, and objects to a sense, but what are the properties and what are their objects? So I'm just focusing on this knowledge piece. And you could see there's some things here that are blacked. That's because there's nothing in the skills and procedures here that refers to them specifically. So I would need to teach this and provide something for students to do with the senses. For example, having an activity that says, what does it mean to touch? What does it mean to have sight? What do we use our sight with? When we see things, what can we see? We can see color, we can see size, we can see all kinds of things. So you'll want to do some things to help explore these particular things, but you can see they are not here. So that's, if you were to, I guess I didn't say this before, but if we were to just use this as a checklist and say we've done everything, no, we've got to connect them up to make sure that these skills and procedures are actually connected to something. If they're not, we need to add our own skills and procedures or activity with it. On the left here, you'll see these high frequency verbs. So if I need to make up an activity for this, here are all the kindergarten high frequency verbs. I could choose any one of these and make an activity with them. Or maybe I might want to use a computer science or scientific method integration, an activity using that to get to one of these, or to get to this, or to get to these understandings. Because I could give students a variety of tasks with each of these understandings. They don't have to be compare and contrast. I can have them explore something. I can have them maybe make some instructions connected to this. So you can see we're not just stuck using these pieces. Just as a peek, I'm going to show you of how a resource is going to be available soon to you that is organized in that way. This is something called the curriculum support document that we're currently working on. And what it will have is for each grade, for each organizing idea, each cusp line will be broken down into broken down for you. You can see how the organization is very similar to that graphic I just showed you. We've got a whole lot of things here that are not in the skills and procedures piece. And so what we've done is here, we've created different surface level activities that would help match this. So there's some sample activities. Or if we're now working at the deep level, because we're working on understanding here, you'll see that we took one of the skills and procedures statements and matched it up here. Well, if we do that, we're working at the deep level. And then there are some other examples here. And you can see here with this particular cusp line, Angela Deering has put in some connections for computer science. So in this column, you're going to see connections for scientific methods and computing science to help you get along. And so I wanted to show this to you at this time. So when you see this document, you can see why we've organized it this way. You're going to have some surface level activities, some deep level activities that will help you move along. This document's not done yet, but it will be available within the next couple of weeks, and it'll be posted on the ARPD website, and I'll show you how to find that a little bit later. So once again, when it comes to those phases of learning, if you come across a skill statement that's connected to the knowledge, it's likely a surface level activity. If you see skills and procedures that's linked to the understanding, you'll know you're working at the independence level or the deep level. And finally, when you're working at the deep level, you can change up the verb and change the context to deepen the understanding of that. So you can keep on working instead of if the skills and procedure statement, as I said, had them compare and contrast something, maybe you might want to have them investigate something related to the understanding. So this has really brought us to a conclusion of this opening session to give you an overview of how the curriculum is organized and how the pieces that fit together, the knowledge, understanding, and the skills and procedures, and how to move from that beginning, teaching kids at the surface level, at least knowing there's that phase that we got to work at that. Then we can work at the understanding and the deep level and give them many opportunities so they begin transferring it. That was the intent of this first session. The session tomorrow is going to be offered by Nicole Lamoureux. She's going to introduce scientific methods, and she'll talk about how can we unpack that and how we can integrate that into the different learning activities that we do. So that'll be tomorrow. On Wednesday, we're taking a look at Angela Deering, and she'll run a session called Wait What? I'm Teaching Computer Science. Yeah, and she'll make you feel very good that you'll be very able and efficient and able to teach computer science after listening to Angela's session on Wednesday. And as a wrap up, we're going to put it all together on day 4. I'll be back with you again, but giving into more specific learning ideas and activities, and how we can put all this together. How can we put together the deep, surface deep transfer together? How do we work with the concepts and the understandings, and some activities that will exemplify some of the things we're talking about a little bit more as a way of putting it all together. One question you may have is, where do I begin? Scope and sequence of things. There are different ways that you can begin. Chris and I have been sharing this scope and sequence, beginning with living systems, matter, then earth systems and energy. Edmonton Catholic has a different scope and sequence, and Edmonton Public as well has a different one. They all go in that way. I think it's just teacher preference, whatever you choose. I'll give you links to how you can access these two here from Edmonton Catholic and Edmonton Public shortly. But all know that each of them also integrate scientific method and computer science. They introduce those more at the beginning of the year in September and October, so that those pieces, because they're basically process-oriented organizing ideas. And so those skills, you want them to kids keep coming back to, applying those skills throughout the year, not just during that time where you unpack that organizing idea with them. Just so you know, when it comes to what we have done at the ARPDC, Chris and I have worked together, and we have already developed the living systems and matter organizing ideas from K-6. We've got a video and a lot of resources and a lot of examples of activities that you can do. I'll show you how to get to that in a second. And coming up from October 9th to 10th is K-6. In those dates, we'll begin with kindergarten and end with grade 6 on the 19th. We'll be looking at earned systems, we'll be unpacking it and sharing you with resources and activities, how that might happen. We'll cover energy in November and space, and check either the CARC or the ERLC websites for registrations for that. At those sessions, again, like I said, we give you an overview, we give you the concept map, we go through a broad review of the organizing idea, and then lots of examples, and Chris has developed some great unit plans and resources that she'll share with you as well. I'm just going to go here. We've taken a look at the new Learn Alberta site. One thing I do want to show you here, though, what I should maybe show you quickly, is when you do click on here, and you could always use your search function to search for some of the items. I want to know where property is, for example, when I talk about science you could just narrow down your searches. So I want to know where properties is used throughout grade 1 science, and I can find those all here. If you're searching for those, I just thought I'd mention that search function for you that we didn't get a chance to do as well. We go to the ARPD site. This is where you'll find a lot of stuff for the new curriculum, not just science. So you'll go to the site, and if you just go to new curriculum, click on that, you'll see all the new curricula here. This is where the science information is held. We want to find the living systems and the matter work that Chris and I have already posted. Then you can just choose your grade. And I'm going to go science, and I'll just stop there and search that. And you'll see that when I do search that, I can see my science implementation, grade 1 matter has shown up, and grade 1 living systems. So you click on that, you'll see the videotape that Chris and I have done, that we recorded the session. You'll have a slide deck of the session, plus any resource that we refer to or any link that has been made in that slide deck is available there as well. And finally, some other resources that you can consider are these. There's lots out there, so that'll help you get on a very good start as well. If you take a look at some of those, you find that some of the organizing ideas are closely related to some of the things we've done here. This is where you'll find the scope and sequence that I referred to for Edmonton Catholic, and the Edmonton Public scope and sequence is linked there. And whoa, okay, I'm going to stop there. As Chris and I have a lot of information to share with you. We've gone through it quickly, but this video will be made available to you, and as well the slide deck. And maybe what I'll do is I'm going to put the link to the slide deck right now. Oh, it's not on here. Okay, I'm just going to, if you can excuse me for a second, I'm just going to get the link to the slide deck so you have that right away. And while I'm doing that, Angela, I don't know if there's any questions. If there are, Angela, can you read them while I'm looking?
I'll have to scroll up. Someone's asking if there are any long range plans or year plans that teachers might begin the year with for pacing.
If you go to the Edmonton Catholic site, they do have some pacing guides. It'll be on that one of those resource slides that I showed you. Go to their crate, learning crates, and the link will be there, and they will have available for you the pacing guides that they use. Where's mine?
And there's lots of, thank you so much for all your hard work, and everybody's very appreciative of the things that they've learned today. And I know there was, I know I saw another question.
Master, there we go.
Oh, yes, this is the one. Someone had asked earlier on about putting in some information for people who teach split grades on your fourth day. So I don't know if you or Chris have any extra things to add around split grades, but that was a request that several people liked and loved that popped up as well. So
Okay, I'm going to do a couple things. I'll respond to that as well. There is the drive to or the link to the drive or the slide deck, excuse me. I'm getting a lot of people saying we need access. I'll take care of that shortly. So if you don't have access right now, and when we hang up here, I think I'll actually stop recording.